Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott, my co-host Awaz, who is chirping away in the background, and then my other cat, Choya, that is currently crawling all over me. So we'll see if she decides to say hi as well. So first things first, if you like the podcast, please give me a 5-star review. Awaz agrees, so, it's important. If you want to book a tarot reading or take one of my self-study little workshops or anything like that, oh my God, Awaz, chill. My website is sabrinamscott.com. And if you want to check out my new clothing line, you can do that at shopsabrinamscott.com. And of course, if you want to say hello on the good old Instagrams, you can do that at sabrinamscott. I've recently started uploading this podcast to YouTube, and that is just under youtube.com/sabrinascott. So yes, there's not as many Sabrinas on YouTube, which is great. I will eventually start uploading short little videos between 5 to 10 minutes. So you'll want to subscribe to get notified when that happens, because I am making a bit of a switch away from Instagram because they don't care about long form videos anymore. And long form video is actually really important to me. I think it's crucial if you want to get to learn something and get really deep into a topic, really. Like the little 30-second, 90-second, 1 minute little videos is really not going to do it. So we all know I believe in rigor and depth and all of that. And I think YouTube is going to be the place where that happens, as well as, of course, this podcast. So subscribe on all the things, please. And thank you so much. So with all that being said, let's get into the topic for today, which is manipulators are everywhere. And it's important to know the signs as well as what to do about it, how to kind of extract yourself, and just like a bit about this, right? So you guys all know my healing journey. I've been through so many things. I've learned a lot of things. I've read a lot of books. I've done a lot of therapy. And along this path, I have learned a lot of shit about how to identify someone who is manipulative and possibly sketchy and possibly narcissistic, like really quickly. So that is something I wanted to share with you guys. My disclaimer is I am in no way a therapist or psychologist or a registered anything in that vein. So this is not medical advice. This is just kind of me babbling and sharing, I don't know, just like some shit I've learned along the way in hopes that it can be helpful to some of you. So manipulators, what is going on? So I'm not going to be talking about like, oh, they're like definitely a narcissist, or they're definitely borderline, or they're definitely whatever. Like, I'm not going to get into the deep, dark depths of like diagnosing anyone or anything in this episode. What I am just going to be talking about is that behavior of manipulation. And a little bit, I'm going to be talking about love bombing as a form of manipulation. But the theme of today is just manipulation, like not any particular diagnosis, because people with and without particular disorders can engage in manipulation. And obviously, I'm not talking about like, oh my God, Awaz, relax. Obviously, I'm not talking about like the normal like manipulative stuff that is not malicious and is not really that big of a deal. Like, we all might like look at our partner with puppy dog eyes if we like really want that slice of cake or something, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not malicious. That's just like whatever, people being people. Like, that's not really what this episode is about. This episode is about manipulation that is like a little bit sneakier. It's a little bit more under the radar if you don't know what to look for, and it gets under your skin really easily, and then before you know it, you're like in this weird situation with this weird person, and it's like what? How did we get here? Because none of this makes sense. Like, that's the type of manipulation I'm talking about. And this type of manipulation, it often sets the stage for more abusive behaviors later, particularly in romantic partnerships, though this can also happen in friendships and in the workplace and stuff like that. So it's definitely not something that is exclusive to romance, though that is a kind of context I'm going to be talking about it in. So manipulation. So it's tough because everyone likes to feel good. Everyone likes to feel adored. Everyone likes to feel like, oh my God, I just met this person and they're so cool. And they're like my dream person. Like, they're just like me. We have so much in common. They think I'm great. They're taking me out to all these places. How amazing is that? And on one hand, it's like, yes, it is amazing. But it's something to be on the lookout for. So, okay, my list of things to be on the lookout for, that's just off the top of my head. I do not have an actual physical list, but let's see how this goes. So number 1 is love bombing. So this can sometimes be a bit hard to tell because sometimes people, like, their love language is giving, whether that's acts of service or gifts. And so people who are not manipulative, who have this way of like giving a lot, one thing to keep on the lookout for is, are they giving just from a genuine place? Does it bring them joy to give to you? And like, is there any ulterior motive? Are they giving in order to get something? And I've had this happen both ways, right? And like, the behavior was kind of the same, where like I was taking all these amazing restaurants, amazing experiences, like just having the best fucking time of life, living life, being happy, just being stoked, like, oh my God, going on all these amazing dates, etc. And so the difference between the love bombers and the people who were just genuine was that the love bombers eventually were kind of like, okay, what's in it for me? They're like, oh, this feels lopsided. This feels like weird. This feels like, you know, when are you going to do something for me? When are you going to, you know, do ABC for me? Because I feel like I've done a lot more for you than you've done for me. So love bombers will give to you in order to create this lingering feeling of obligation, like you owe them. And so they will do all this nice stuff that's just like all the dreamiest stuff you ever could have wanted. At first, it might seem like they're doing it out of the like kindness of their hearts, just like please you and have a good time. But eventually it will become very clear that they kind of resent you for everything they've done for you. And they will try to basically manipulate you into doing something for them, no matter if that's like within your way of being, no matter if that's something you want to do or not. Like, they don't really care. Like, their whole thing is to use all of this love bombing stuff, like, in order to make you feel indebted. And then if you don't do what they want, then they take away all the love bombing, or they threaten to like, okay, well, you know, we're not going to do that anymore then if you don't do ABC thing that I want. And it becomes this very like keeping score, like, you know, type of thing. Like, it's very clearly not done from a nice place at the end of it. And whenever I've been in this situation, it's always been so fascinating, because I'm thinking of like one recent one in particular. It was so interesting because the person was like, oh yeah, this is lopsided. And I was like, yeah, like we just met. Like, we met like a week and a half ago. Like, of course it's lopsided. Like, you're courting me. That's like what's happening. Like, you know, eventually, if I'm safe in a relationship, then I'm happy to give. But like, literally, I don't know you, and I didn't ask you to do any of the millions of nice things you've done for me. So what? Whereas someone who is like actually kind and genuine and is giving for the sake of giving in a healthy way, like, would really never say something like that. Like, they would never make you feel guilty or weird or like they resent you for just doing something that they decided to do of their own free will. Like, I did not hold a gun to anyone's head to get them to take me to like nice restaurants or like nice outings or nice dates. It's like, people need to take responsibility for their own behavior, their own actions, right? And so a healthy person will behave really, really differently than an unhealthy person in this situation. And by unhealthy person, what I really mean is someone who is manipulative. And so they're not taking responsibility for their own choices, their own actions to kind of pamper you. And they're blaming that on you and then saying, hey, guess what? You've got a debt now. So do you understand what I'm saying? Hopefully you do. It's a very, like, on the outside, it seems like a very subtle difference, but the whole motivation, the whole mechanism of the giving is two very different things. So, okay, that one's out of the way. So another one that manipulators will use is called future faking. And so even though you've like just met, they will be like coming up with all these like future things to do together. And on one hand, like when you're dating someone, it's like optimistic and pleasant to think about, oh yeah, this is totally going to be a thing in a few months, hopefully, and like vaguely talk about what you're going to do in the summer or next winter or whatever. Like that can be really cute. And I think that can show healthy optimism in the connection. Like I think on one hand, that can be really good. But the way that manipulators do it is not quite that way. It's like premature. It's like literally within the first 2 weeks, like, I'm going to marry you, or we're going to get married one day, or you're my girl, or you're my man, or whatever. And in 2 weeks, like literally no one can know anyone well enough that it makes like any sense to say something like that. And so the future faking, it's a way of getting people really invested like prematurely and feeling like they're being swept off their feet. Whereas a healthy relationship, it does have a bit of a slower burn. So let me talk about that. So manipulators will expedite the getting to know you process and create intimacy like way too fast. So one example of this is from a recent personal experience, is someone who is manipulative will want to know everything about you like more quickly than it is appropriate for them to know all of that about you. So I'll give you an example from my life somewhat recently. So someone kept asking me about my trauma history because I was like, oh yeah, my family isn't in my life. Because, you know, when you get into like the family questions, like that kind of happens. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, they're just not in the picture is usually what I'll say, just to keep it vague, you know, whatever. And then if anyone says why, which this person did, I was like, oh, you know, just like not great. Just like bad childhood stuff. Don't want to really get into it any more than that. Like, that's just what it is, you know? So that was on the first date. And then on the fourth one, the person like literally looked into my eyes and was like, so tell me about your mother. And I was just like, no, you know, it was just like weird. And so like, that is such a weird thing to say. And so what I'm trying to use as an example here is a manipulator is going to try to find those things that hurt you. They're going to try to find like something that you're upset about. They're going to try to find like stuff that like your parents used to do or say that really hurt you, stuff that exes used to do or say that really hurt you. Like in this example, this person also asked about my previous relationship and why it ended. And I was just like, oh, like he was just not in a good place mentally. Like he just had some mental health like issues, and that's the truth, and didn't work out, and that's fine. And I'm not really interested in throwing anyone under the bus or like really explaining the whole ins and outs of my like ex relationships to like someone I literally just met. And the person asked, oh, was it abusive? And it's like, no. Like, and if it was, it's not your business. I just met you. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. And so manipulators will try to get into all of this information about you in order to use it against you later, like during an argument. And I'll give an example of that like later on in this episode when we get there. But normal people don't really do that. Like they might kind of get the picture of like, okay, she doesn't want to talk about her family right now. Okay, like exes, why are we even talking about that on an early date? And so they'll just ask like normal questions, like stuff that's more like getting to know you, like about work and friends and hobbies and passions and stuff, like food, music, comedy, like whatever you are into. Like that's the kind of stuff that builds connection and intimacy in early dating or in early friendships or early connections of any sort. Like it shows pretty poor boundaries to ask someone about something so brutal, like immediately. And then it also shows poor boundaries if someone was actually going to divulge that information in detail, right? And part of the reason why I wanted to name this on this podcast episode is because, I totally used to be that person. Like when I was very in my trauma and still very activated and upset by it in like a frequent daily basis, I totally didn't have boundaries. I would like babble about my trauma to anyone who would listen because I was so desperate to be heard, and that was very unhealthy. I had very poor boundaries, and that of course led to like more crappy things happening. And so even if you are in like the throes of trauma, you just had something really bad happen to you yesterday, like for the love of God, for the love of like every divinity on the planet, please don't tell that stuff to a stranger, because their motivations for knowing it are probably not good, and they're probably going to use it against you later on when you're feeling vulnerable. So yes. Whereas in a normal connection, that stuff will come out, but it will only come out over time and when trust has been cultivated, right? Because it makes sense to share that stuff with people who care about us and respect us, but after the 2-week mark, like just as an example, like we really don't know that person well enough to really be able to say either way, like what the vibe is and if they're like, someone to trust with that. And so the reasonable thing to do is to just not share that stuff with someone you literally just met. You know what I mean? Or if you do, just be on the lookout for some additional manipulative behaviors which may pop up. So let's see what else. So another example of manipulative behavior, or someone who is a manipulator and just like not in a healthy mental state, and like someone you really don't want to fuck with in any way. And by fuck with, I don't mean like annoy, because like whatever, annoy these people as much as you want, but that you don't want in your life, because it's just not going to go well for you, basically. So these people will remember things that you've said in an argument or in elsewhere in life, and then bring it up in an argument to use against you and insult you and basically undermine what it is you're saying. So I've kind of made a vow in my life that like the last time that happened in a relationship for me, I think was like 2017, 2018 maybe. And so I made a vow that like never in my life will I ever like date or be friends with anyone who behaves that way like ever again in my entire life, because it's such a shit show. Like those people are just cruel. They're like mean and rude for like no reason. I think just to feel powerful, and just like they get off on hurting people. So fuck that. So I'll use an example. And so this is from a recent situation, and it's funny like what this person chose to try and use against me, because I just didn't share really anything like intimate or vulnerable or traumatic. So like what they chose to use was like really grasping at straws, but it gave me like a window into their technique, and I was seeing like, oh, okay, so this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. Noted. So I was expressing that I was hurt by something that this person had not done, basically, was kind of the short version. And this person, and I basically said, oh, I want an apology. And they said, oh, I don't feel like I did anything wrong, so I don't feel sorry and I'm not going to apologize. And I basically said, well, if you hurt my feelings, that is worth an apology in and of itself. Like, even if I didn't do anything wrong per se, and I hurt your feelings, I would absolutely apologize. Like, you know, that's the nice thing to do. Like, that would be from my heart. And the person said, oh, so you want a Canadian apology? And what that was basically throwing back some of my previous words in my face. On our first date, I talked about the differences that I experienced living in America, which is where I grew up, the United States, Colorado, what, and Canada, which is where I am living now. And so I've spent my life in half. I do find Americans a lot more direct. I do find some Canadians to be quite passive-aggressive and kind of fake. Not all of y'all, of course. But I was just talking about the cultural differences between the two countries and what I like and dislike about both. And so this person decided to bring that up when I just was asking for an apology. Like, decided to kind of like be cutting in that way. Obviously, I just find it kind of laughable and funny and just like absurd, like, you know, but I was like, okay, noted. Now I can see who you are. Okay, noted. Healthy people don't behave that way. Manipulative people do. A healthy person will just be like, okay, yeah, like, my bad. I totally didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I can see why it did. I don't think I did anything wrong per se, but I can see that bothered you. And so, like, I'm sorry that your feelings are hurt. That's what a normal person will do. A manipulative person is going to make you feel bad or try to manipulate you into feeling bad when you ask for something, when you ask for an apology, in this case, this like little example, and will do that by using things that you've said in order to undercut you. And so this is really subtle, and it's hard to pick up on if you are not experienced with it and if you don't know what to look for. But imagine, right? Like, imagine I had shared like something about my parents or something about whatever bad thing. Like, that would have been an opportunity for this person to like use that to dig into me, right? And so that is part of why I really recommend like not sharing that stuff early on with folks. Like, let them earn it, right? Because that stuff is intimate, it's personal, and not everyone deserves the proximity to you to know all of this intimate stuff about your life. Right? It's important to kind of wait it out on stuff like that. So what else? Manipulators also don't apologize for anything. They don't like taking responsibility for things. They're never wrong. So healthy folks will usually be able to tell like if it's appropriate or not to apologize. There's some stuff that I haven't felt the need to apologize for, but because someone was upset, like, yeah, I'm happy to. But it's very situational. But even if I wasn't going to apologize personally, like, I would never try to say something cutting and malicious like that person did to me in that example that I just gave, right? So that's another thing, is so be on the lookout for people who can't apologize or won't apologize, or who understand that you're hurt, but they just like don't care. So one sign of manipulators as well is you share your vulnerability and then you feel more alone at the end of the conversation, or just as alone at the end of the conversation as you did at the beginning. Because ideally, the point of a conversation about a vulnerability is to feel closer. It's to cultivate closeness. It's to cultivate intimacy, right? Mutual care for one another. But at the end of a conversation, you're feeling as isolated and alone as you did at the beginning. This person clearly doesn't give a fuck and is likely someone who is manipulative rather than healthy and caring. Very important. Trying to think of what other examples I can think of here that are things to be on the lookout for with someone who is manipulative. Oh yeah, so I guess the other thing that would come to mind is they kind of like mirror you in this way that is very like inauthentic. And it comes off for me now as contrived and just fake. And it's like really excessive. So I'll give an example from my life recently. So you guys know this podcast had an episode called Happiness is Cool and Sexy. So the day that episode went live, this person texted me and was like, oh, I'm so happy today. I'm just like so good. And it was like so fucking weird because it was like a few hours after my podcast went live, and if like it was any other day then I would have been like, okay, whatever. But like there's just some like weird correlations that way, where it was like something I would say or talk about on the podcast or in my life or whatever, all of a sudden like this person would like have something to say about it, or really try to just be over the top. And on one hand, it's like, yeah, of course, like we want people to connect with us. Like we want there to be that common ground. Like that can feel really beautiful and amazing and all of that. But on the flip side, what we have to be on the lookout for is this coming from a genuine place? Is this authentic? Or is this something that they are doing to manipulate us into trusting them more because, okay, we're the same? And sometimes time is really just what will tell what the situation is. And so that is why, like, not expediting things. I can't remember if I talked about that yet on this list, but expediting things is something else that these manipulative folks tend to do, is they'll try to collapse time and create a very intimate, very close relationship in the span of like 2 seconds, aka like a week or whatever. It's a bit much, right? What else do I want to talk about with this? I feel like I've covered a lot of it, but I guess the one last thing would be, notice how does someone react when you say no to them, or when you're basically saying, hey, you hurt my feelings. How someone reacts to that is going to tell you a lot about them and who they are as a person. Are they going to get defensive? Are they going to get cold? Are they going to stonewall you? Are they going to punish you? Are they going to pout? Are they going to ignore you? Silent treatment? Are they going to basically be cold and nasty? Or are they going to be like a normal, healthy person and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That wasn't my intention, but my bad. Are we cool? How can I make it up to you? What would you like me to do next time differently? That is how a healthy person reacts to that type of thing, in my opinion. But someone who is manipulative is going to really take that hard. They're going to be really upset, right? And really defensive and cold. So it's not even necessarily upset, but just standoffish, and will make you feel insane for even bringing anything up and even being upset about anything. And one of the things that I always walk with is is that how I want to feel with someone I'm close to? No, not at all. I want to feel comfortable and safe and easy breezy. I want to feel soft, and I want to be in a container where I am safe to be soft, because I know the other person, whether that's a friend or a lover or whatever, can hold that softness and creates a safe container where I know I'm going to be protected, I'm going to be cared for, I'm going to be respected, and that they'll be able to witness me and hear me even if it's hard to hear. Does that make sense, my beautiful people? And so it's really important, I think, to be on the lookout for this stuff, because it is so sneaky. It is so sneaky, and it can be so easy to feel oh, wow, I just met the best person ever. But, it was so interesting because everything changed with this person as soon as I basically said, hey, when you did ABC, that hurt my feelings, and I'm not vibing when you said DCE. Everything went to shit after that because then they kind of flipped and did all this other stuff. And I'm not going to get into the whole story because it's irrelevant. The reason I'm even talking about it is to be a bit of a learning lesson for everybody and remind us all, myself included, of some of these tells that we can be on the lookout for in order to keep ourselves safe and interacting with healthy, caring people who want the best for us, and who are not going to be basically trying to implant their claws of manipulation into us and then bait and switch from gushing, loving, decadent, pampering to devaluing, insulting, and humiliating, and all of that, right? Because that is some of what can happen. And so I know that many of y'all are also on a healing journey, and so I hope that you can use these tips to keep yourself safe and maybe understand your past a little bit better, because I do find this framework, at least for me, is helpful just to kind of be on the lookout, observe, and see what's going on. And, with this particular person, I had a hunch, but I was kind of you know what, it's harmless. I'm going to go along for the ride until this becomes something that it may or not be. And it was. And I'm glad I was on the lookout for that stuff, because it's important, Anywho, friends, that's the episode for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it through, this is a 30-minute episode today, so thank you for listening. I hope you learned something. If you like this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Please tell your friends. It is on YouTube as well, so please follow, subscribe, all of that stuff. I appreciate you. Of course, say hi on Instagram at Sabrina M. Scott. You can also say hi on my website, sabrinamscott.com. Check out my clothing line at shopsabrinamscott.com. And I will see y'all on the next episode. Bye.